scheduled meeting. And we're now, I guess, 3, 4 weeks in the school. Things happen fast. The last time we met was in August before we even kicked things off. And I think we were working through staff orientation, planning, student orientation. And so a lot happens within schools in just a few weeks. So look forward to providing some updates tonight and working with you all on at least 2 deep dives centering on the questions that I sent out this morning. So I think with that, we're going to kick off with the mission moment. And Melissa, you're going to kick things off. You ready?
Yeah. We are going to celebrate 2 of our 10th graders, recent 10th graders, 9th graders in my heart, Evan and Ibrahima, who just received a fellow program at JP Morgan. This is a very cool program. A couple of my friends in college did this one. But they begin participating in the fellowship over the summer, and they continue through their high school. And as fellows, they get career and college job experience. They build a professional network. They get to work in a real life office. And it's really cool under the mentorship of JP Morgan employees. And then they're at the end of the program able to apply for internships at JP Morgan, as well as a $10,000 college scholarship. So they can continue even beyond Unity. So it really connects to our career and college mission. And we want to congratulate both of these kiddos. We got to do a little bit of that in congratulating their hard work last year at Back to School Night, where we celebrated their honor roll status as well. So some shine to these kiddos who are living out the mission.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. Yeah, I got to see Evan and his mom waiting in line. We had a sort of a long line for back to school night at the high school last week. And so got to chat with them. And it was great to hear mom talk about the fellowship too, and how pleased she was that the school introduced her family to the fellowship and that Evan's taken part. So just felt nice. And I think just stepping back, internships overall, I think, had frozen up or certainly decreased in frequency across the city with COVID. And so now we're kind of bouncing back over the past year and a half. And I think with that, we want to also kind of bring back more of the internship opportunities that we had in place before COVID. And so this is just one example of that, with more room to certainly expand. I'll say a bit more about that later, coming out of the ECPC committee meeting last week. So pleased for this, and let's do more of this. And just, I think, with the people here tonight, you all work and exist in various fields that could be intriguing to our students. And so as opportunities come across that you feel might be really beneficial to our kids, and there's something there, certainly shout it out and let me know, let Melissa know, and we can bring it to our academic counseling team and then kids. So thank you for that. This is exciting. With that, we'll move into current headlines. And these are headlines going back, I guess, a week and a half now. We'll provide a couple of updates on them, but this is just to give you a sense of where we are as a school a few weeks in. The ECPC team and SLC heard some of these, but I'll offer updates as they have occurred. So I think with that, Melissa, you want to say a few things about maybe the academic fronts of school a few weeks in, both with STAR testing and with middle school state exam results from the spring?
Yep. So STAR reading and math diagnostic testing is underway. It is complete at the middle school and is completing this week at the high school, where they're doing a slower rollout. We're looking at 95% of students per grade, and then we'll be able to see where students are as a baseline to begin some individualized planning for them. Our middle school state exam results are both in and not in since we wrote this. So while we as a school have received our exam results, and they're looking much stronger when we compare numbers year over year, we know that the state has not released their exam results yet and has cautioned us to not read in too much until we have a little bit more information, as it was a new test this year and our comparables aren't there. So we are hopeful that in short term, we'll know a lot more and can begin seeing what was predictive of success where we closed gaps relative to district and state, et cetera.
Melissa, you want to continue and offer any headlines you feel is worthy for the full board here?
Yep. Strategic academic shifts. Last time we reported on some of our key initiatives for this year. We have now launched our sourced external curriculum in curricula in 6th through 8 ELA, math, science, as well as in high school algebra and living environment. It's actually biology. We're moving towards the new curriculum now. Ironing out the kinks. Teachers are reporting that they feel supported by these resources, though they're vast. So we're working through those. I had a call with some of our curriculum friends today. These courses have been a focus for my observations in the first weeks of the school year, so we can make sure that they've launched strongly. We've also identified 2 systems for middle school tutoring intervention. We are moving forward with one online system that can be used by all kids and adapts to their needs specifically. All Unity teachers have now been trained in Danielson via an external professional development team this summer, and they are engaging in self-assessments this month. Our PBIS teams, that's our positive behavior support and intervention service systems teams, exist at each site now. Our high school had their first meeting this Monday, our middle school next Monday. Josh, myself, and our principals will be conducting tiered fidelity inventories alongside those teams in both school sites in the next month. Those are large inventories of all of our systems from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3 across both schools, and we're doing some work with that with a cross-site principal visit tomorrow.
And if folks have questions following up on the updates, feel free to just shout out. In addition, I guess this is a bit old now, or it feels old because we've been now back in school for a few weeks, but we did in late August and early September welcome staff back in, students back in. Both events, both orientations went relatively well, and I think the feedback was solid, and so nothing to report out of the ordinary there, other than things went as planned with both of these big events. I think the planning for both of these is significant in each year, and so just kudos to our teams in their prep work and in their facilitation. Other things that are kind of going on, we have athletics now happening, tryouts for the fall are happening, our after school programs are up and happening. Enrollment right now, just to give a sense of things, is at about 548, give or take 1 or 2, which is north of where we were last year by perhaps as many as 10 students, so that feels good. Staffing wise, there's been a little bit of movement. We hired a learning specialist in the humanities this past week. We now have a vacancy with a reading interventionist position at the middle school, in addition to an ELA teacher. We're covering both positions internally. There are interviews happening later this week for both positions. At the high school, we have no vacancies at this point in time. With regard to just machinery and setting targets and having our dashboards aligned with those targets and goals for the year, as well as our performance evaluations, that's now all in process and happening kind of behind the scenes with Melissa, myself, principals, other leaders. So that's happening. I reported out to a few of the committees that we did apply for a grant with the state earlier this month. So that's it's a fairly significant grant and would be meaningful to our school in a number of areas. And so we'll find out later this month whether that is something that we've been approved for. And if so, the funding would be available as of November and for the coming 3 years. Beyond that, just playbook stuff. We talked about our playbook last month in detail, and some feedback from team was like, hey, this is a really good document. Lots of organizations have documents like this and they get buried. And so here are some things that you might want to think about and do to have it live. These are all in process now, but these were some of the ideas that came up through our conversation last week and then coming into it. So still live. And then finally, Melissa mentioned school climate-wise, what we're going to be doing tomorrow and over the coming week with a self-assessment using a real deal external rubric that we appreciate. It's the first time we've done this and looking at just our PBIS systems at the school for how we interact and promote really safe, healthy, positive school experiences for kids of all kinds of experiences and backgrounds. So excited by that tomorrow. It's going to be rigorous and it's going to be engaging. We're going to have fun doing it. So that's tomorrow. And at some point in time, I will invite you in to take part in other rounds of this over the coming year. Those are headlines. Any questions before moving into the first deep dive of this evening? Cool. So with that, strategic planning wise, we're going to talk about priority goals and targets for 23-24. The big key question is whether these goals meet the mark coming from this board on the things that matter most to our success as a school in 23-24. This comes out of a really productive conversation with the SLC just over a week ago. And so Juliana and Jeanette know that I've made some updates based on that conversation, and they're reflected here today. Feel free to chime in if I happen to miss anything at all, or you've got kind of follow-up questions for Melissa and for me. And with that, we jump in. But the general idea here is, do these goals meet the mark according to team members on the call tonight? So let's see. I'm going to move into our playbook again, and really the questions we're working with in relation to our goals and targets get at, if you recall last month, I brought to you a few of the key questions coming in and coming out of our playbook and what that playbook answers. Deep questions about why we exist, why we do the work we do, how we behave. And tonight we're going to be focusing on two questions, which is how we succeed and what matters most to us right now. And so these goals should reflect indications of both of these key questions. In terms of like motivation, goal is that we establish these targets for the coming year and begin working on them, which we've done, but we're polishing them tonight. And then just stepping back in terms of like a rationale or what we're aiming for and what's guiding our decisions here. These goals should reflect the following. They should be data informed. They should be clear and focused. They should be both reasonable and ambitious, something that we can track and monitor. And in terms of the approach, all staff members at our school have measurable outcomes that they're aware of and that inform their success over the year. At the same time, not all the goals we have at the school are created equal. Some matter more to our kids and their success than others. And so this is really just a priority set of goals we're going to be focusing on tonight, not a universal set. The goals themselves are informed by some of the feedback we got from SED during our renewal visit last year. And so this is a document or a slide that you saw back in May, where for each of the benchmarks, mentioned where there were areas of growth. Here are some of the actions I propose we take in addressing those areas of growth. Our priority goals reflect these actions being carried through with fidelity. And so with that, here are the 10 top priority goals that I'm proposing tonight that, again, were discussed with the SLC just over a week ago. A couple of amendments have been made since then, but they're organized across each benchmark. And benchmark one is the major benchmark that matters most to us and our authorizer, which is around student performance. And you'll see a heavier collection of goals centered on student performance. And then two other benchmarks that are key to driving student academic success relate to the quality of teaching and learning in our building and the quality of the climate and culture that students and staff kind of exist within each and every day. So those two benchmarks are also reflected here. And then finally, there is one metric around financial success and meeting each of the metrics that SED deems most important, reflecting fiscal health at the school. So what I want to do is I want to give folks maybe a minute who are specifically seeing this for the first time. And these are just general headlines. We're going to dig into the more precise measures here in a moment and look at another document, which I think is helpful. But the headlines here are meant to reflect some of the things that we wish to achieve in the coming year and that we feel are important. Well, the question for you all again is, do you believe that, or would you have recommendations for changes? additions, subtractions, or perhaps reprioritization. So let me give you a minute to look this over, and then we'll answer any clarifying questions before digging in a bit more deeply. As you're doing that, Juliana and Jeanette, you'll note that benchmark 2 and the goal number 2 now reflects proficiency. And you'll note I've added a measure around college readiness and Regents pass rates. So the percentage who score above a certain threshold that aligns with college readiness.
Thank you. Yes, I did notice that.
Mm-hmm. So are there clarifying questions here? I guess that's maybe the first question before digging into probing questions. And maybe Jim and Sal, I'll come to you first because I did dig into this.
No, I'll wait for the rest of it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sal, anything here?
No, I'm good at the moment. It's a lot to take in, short amount of time.
Yeah, I realize that. We'll spend some more time with it, but let's do that. I'm going to move on to another way of looking at this. So this is the backstage version, where what you've just seen right now are the 10 goals. They're listed in this column around different goals that we're aiming for this year. The first being around increasing average middle school scores in ELA and math. What this table also provides, which is a bit more detailed, is the grade levels that the goals align to. For each goal, I've listed them out more specifically such that they're smart, they're measurable, and provide kind of a timeline for when they should be achieved by. That's also listed here for each goal. So I guess the aim here is for you to get a sense of generally what's here, as well as just process-wise, appreciate or question the way in which we're going about this, the process and what we're kind of laying out, what we're thinking about as we devise the goals. Each of these goals are lagging goals. They're things that happen toward the end of the year or after actions have been taken. I'll say a bit more about that momentarily. And then we've got minimum targets and aspirational targets for each, as well as owners, captains specifically, and then their teams that are primarily responsible for leading in the achievement of each of these goals. And so just maybe to stamp a couple of things here, we've got some goals around growth in ELA and math in the middle school. There's a goal around proficiency in ELA and math at the middle school. As you all may recall, we don't have state results yet, so we have no comparable sense of things at this point in time. So it's hard to sort of anchor our goals to our district of location, which is what we're required to do with our authorizer. And so right now, we feel as if we hit our growth goals, we will also be successful in meeting or outperforming our districts of location. And so that's really the stand-in that we're aiming for now. But when we do get information about where things stand proficiency-wise with our districts of location, those will be incorporated into our thinking and into our planning. There's some goals around Regents exams at the high school, which kids need to pass in order to graduate, both generally just pass rates and then high pass rates. And then there's some goals around AP scores, which are meant to reflect kind of college readiness, where we're looking to make gains and increase the percentage of kids that score 2s, 3s, and above by a distinct set of percentage points. Graduation rate, that's here. And then there's some goals around inputs, such as goals around our curriculum and the way in which we are auditing it and checking for quality over the course of the year. Goal around pedagogical skills and growth that's demonstrated using that framework that Melissa mentioned earlier, the Danielson framework. And so we've identified 8 essential components of that framework that we're going to be focusing our time on that we feel are most important for teacher development and capacity. And so that will guide our success here. And then one around climate, where we look at just the overall climate of school over a number of occasions over the course of the year, using the rubric I mentioned a moment ago, centering in on a score, and then wanting to make gains in that score, as well as reach a specific target within that score on 2 consecutive occasions. And that's been given to us by PBIS, the framework we subscribe to, as a general demonstration of success culture-wise at a school. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's some goals around our S&D financial metrics. Stepping back, again, if we were to hit each of these goals over the course of the year, this would be a mighty successful year for us as a school. And so that's really what this is meant to reflect. There are goals that aren't reflected here. So we have had to sort of like say, these are important, but don't make the top 10 list. Obviously, we plan around those as well, but these for us feel like they are most important. And so these are the goals that we'll sort of center our reporting on and our monitoring on over the course of the year. Let me pause there with that orientation for team and see if there are any additional sort of thoughts or follow-up questions at this point in time. Jeanette or Juliana, would you add anything coming out of our conversation last week? Or Melissa as well?
Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think you hit on the key points. I think one of the things that we talked about before we saw this chart was, the need to have clear ownership of our 10 key goals. And then Josh brought up this chart and showed the clear sort of ownership and reporting lines, which I thought was helpful and thoughtful. So I think you hit the key points, Josh.
The only thing I was going to add is that I think the process, the early draft, spent a little less time on just absolute performance for kids. So that's something that we've come to this year. I'd also highlight that the state in the new framework we are looking at is very concerned with college readiness. That's an upgrade to the language they've made twice. So I think that there are some elements here that prioritize that over how we've done this in years past. So that's the second thing I'd really highlight here.
Okay.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I'm getting like a little robot noise from others, so just making sure. Thank you.
Nope, loud and clear. Okay, so I mentioned that all of these goals were sort of lagging indicators or goals of success, meaning that like they happen toward the end of our good work. And so that's fine, but it also perhaps leaves a void of wanting to position ourselves over the course of the year to make course corrections when need be. And that then requires some leading indicators to then inform our decisions over the course of the year, so we're best positioned to see these goals through. And so the second part of our conversation today, as we move into dashboard work, is just what are some of those leading indicators specifically, and whether they're sufficient. So I want to just sort of share those with you now briefly. It's not something you have to absorb, but I think it's helpful for the full board to have a sense of, first, that we have leading indicators, and second, that we will be relying on them over the course of the year to guide our work. And so I think this is kind of more of the fun stuff around SLC each and every month or every other month, but it is something that we report out to the full board as is valuable. So with that, for each of these, there are a series of leading indicators. Hold on one second. And those are mentioned here in white. And so for the first goal, just to give you an example of how this works and how we're thinking about this, we have a goal around growth at the middle school, and that is that the percentage of students at our middle school who demonstrate developing a score of 2 or proficient or above, a score of 3 or 4 will increase this year by a certain number of percentage points. And that would happen in the spring. And then we find out in August of next year whether it indeed happened. So there's this extreme lag that happens. Along the way, we do have ways in which we're assessing our progress. And those include, in this example, our fall STAR assessments, which Melissa mentioned earlier. Those are going on now. We'll report out our baseline findings next month during our October meeting. That will give us a sense of where kids are and the degree to which we are in line with our proficiency goals for middle school math, as well as where we're starting at with regard to growth and having kids move from one proficiency level to the next. In addition to having STAR in September, we'll have our first round of interim assessments in late October. So we'll then report out to the board in November how those go and have gone. And that will give us a sense of progress. And then it will also inform our actions from that point in time moving into the winter months. In January, there's yet another series of assessments with STAR happening in January, and then a mock exam happening in late January. Which gives us a real sense of kind of where kids are before moving into a more explicit test prep season in both ELA and math. And so we've got 4 data points for this one lagging goal around growth. And these 4 indicators align with some of the other goals we have about proficiency, both in middle school and at the high school too. So I give this to you so that you've got an understanding of over the course of the year as we think about progress. These are some of the assessments we'll rely on to inform that progress and actions moving forward. And for each of these 10 goals that I've brought to the full team today, there are identified leading indicators that will be helpful to us over the course of the year. So let me pause there. We're going to talk about
Just
dashboards and how
one
those
question.
show up here in a moment. But Jim,
Yeah,
go ahead.
one question on row 18, the 8th grade reading, which is, we've known for a long time that's critical. So if 90% are at the grade level, what does that translate to into, when you think of ELA, proficiency, et cetera, those sorts of scores? Does that mean that 90% will be proficient in 8th grade?
I'll let Melissa field that. Then Juliana, if you've got a few tidbits you want to add in there, feel free.
It would be a good indicator. So I think just like being a very strong reader makes anyone better on tests, that is a strong indicator. And we know those who struggle to hit those benchmarks struggle most on the exam. It is not, ELA is testing some other knowledge that is reading is a necessary component for. So it won't be a perfect analog, but we've looked at our, so far, the various measures we use to predict our leading indicators. And we know that STAR is one of our most reliable assessments. So far, we're getting like that last bits of information from the state. It looks like last year our June STAR scores were pretty much around 80% predictive of how students would do by bands. And then STAR would say, Renaissance would say that product is around in the 80s, the high 80s of how predictive students would do on exams. So if 90% of 8th graders are reading on grade level, then we will be hitting our goals in ELA assessments.
And where are we now, would you say?
With
we'll report that out next month when we
the 90%
STAR results.
Closer to 60, I think.
But STAR tests ELA, not reading, right?
STAR tests reading.
It does. Okay.
And it tests reading comprehension. So from that, we need to unpack when students aren't reading on grade level, what's going on. But and there's some analysis there, but it's not the ELA exam. It's not a mock assessment.
Okay. And then can you just talk about some of the further up or somewhere, talk about getting like third-party curriculum? You just talk a bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Melissa, you want to take that too?
Yeah, are we talking about how we know? So this is our launch. We're talking about this goal. This is our launch year with this. So what we know we need to do is make sure that it is a good move and it is working for students. So we're
Oh, can
going
I
to
just
do,
start? Can I stop you right there? So
yes,
how did it happen before? And then, what was the change and how you rolling it out? What'd you change it to?
yes. I'd say long before, Unity did use one name curriculum, and that curriculum or that set of curricula has been since proven not to be a strong curriculum in Teachers College reading and writing workshops. So between there, teachers have been patching in math, largely we've created internal curriculum. We are in a moment that's being called the curriculum renaissance, where just so much research has come out about the power of having strong curricula across contents and grade levels, and really looking at the what we're teaching there. So we did some research in the spring alongside our chairs to identify strong curricula that we would use in 6th through 8th ELA and math. We are using Wit and Wisdom, which is heavy on writing, uses actual texts, novel-based texts, and does a ton with discourse. In math, we're using Eureka, which is from the same company, does a lot of like analysis-based math. It's strongly correlated to New York State standards and the next gen standards. These were important also because we've shifted to a new set of standards. So we're using those, which come with everything. And then same with algebra, we're using a very strong curriculum that's being used across New York City schools for the most part. I'm getting very detailed. Josh is smiling at me. And then living environment, because we knew we need to move there, and we see that coming. So we looked at the strength of the content, and they come with a dizzying amount of resources. So we are working to unpack them as a team, and then just to make sure that we are keeping our thumb on the pulse of, is this serving kids? Juliana connected us with Dream. They shared how they took a very deep look at their curriculum, what was in existence and what they added, and we'll follow some of that flow for launching and analyzing how we're doing.
Okay, great. Oh, can I just ask you, you mentioned that Teachers College thing. I read something about it, a couple of weeks ago. Where do you replace that? Is that the one where everybody thought it was the most amazing thing, and it turns out it doesn't work all that well?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah,
So
that was what I learned.
Yeah, and that was one. I think it was an article on phonics where I read that. Maybe probably
Yeah.
New Yorker.
Yep.
So, what is what you've gone to more phonics based, or is it just out of curiosity?
So we're talking about an ELA curriculum at the middle school level. So at this point, the assumption is that this is like our grade level curriculum, and that students should have mastered that skill in 1st grade, had it intervened if they had not. So this is talking about that like grade level work of analysis, tons of writing, tons of reading. Kids should be doing so much of that at this level. The reason we have things like STAR and some other things that I talked about, iReady, is one thing that we will be using to supplement where kids need more foundational skills. Those are our reading curriculums. One of my anxieties now is that we don't have a reading interventionist specifically doing that work at the middle school. So we are looking at, that's one of the reasons we're moving with iReady, that does some of the individualizing for students, while we will make sure that we can train up the next person that we find, or folks who are doing that work in the interim. I'm also getting certified in, or micro certified in the science of reading, is the kind of like cute term we're using for it now. So we're also putting in those more intervention pieces across both sites for students who are behind on those skills and should have mastered them. But our core curriculum will be grade level curriculum.
Thanks, Jim. Jeanette or Juliana, would you add anything just based on Jim's questions or based on what Melissa has put forward?
No, I think the leading indicators are just going to be key, like we talked about last week, and just progress monitoring them and figuring out what's the right level to bring here, to keep the board abreast. I do think this piece around thinking about your incoming students that are coming in from local district schools, as you guys don't have them in elementary, and just curious about the additional supports in addition to testing them to get their grade level reading. I saw a note around exploring additional tutoring opportunities. And Melissa, obviously you mentioned needing to find an interventionist eventually and yourself getting trained. Is there any additional like proactive work that you've already started this year, knowing that you have kind of those holes, but also, again, we have a group of students coming from local districts that, if I had to guess, are not only not on grade level, but also likely did not achieve state testing last year?
Yeah, we have trained folks up on Wilson's over the summer. That we need more folks at the middle school, but at the high school where we're actually seeing sort of larger gaps in grade level. So that's another piece we've done. I alluded to iReady. We weighed a couple of different things. iReady made more sense than Freckle or other things that we're using because there are phonics components that are individualized for students. There is a tutoring block that exists at the middle school for all students that didn't exist in the same way last year. That is in an RTI structure. So teachers will identify which students they need for a small group, and other students have work that they can work on. So that is a structure that we can use that. And even if we don't have experts on phonics, phonemic awareness, developing vocabulary, we do have that program that will individualize to students. That is not a perfect solution, but it is a solution that can be implemented swiftly and for every child at their level for at least 40 minutes a week in each math and ELA. So there are other things that we have put in place, though we know that a trained interventionist for students who are well behind on literacy skills is going to be necessary. So finding a human or training humans swiftly is like not a thing that we'll put down when we pick up a wonderful program like iReady, but something like iReady. It's additional practice and meeting students where they're at. We also pair really closely with the collaborative for inclusive education. So there's supports and development for adults there as well.
Yeah, that's great. So I would say perhaps in adding to leading indicators, maybe not here specifically, but more in working with the folks on the ground, distinguishing the students that are struggling with the phonics versus it's just the comprehension. And I think it's easier to progress monitor weekly the students that are struggling with the phonics to get them caught up. You can get them caught up so quickly with direct instruction. Yeah. You just have the right direct instruction. So perhaps that's just something to consider as to add to leading indicators in between these major interim assessment rounds.
Yes, we also use Literably, which does so universal screener is STAR. Literably can be used to do running records for students multiple times a year. It was leaning a little bit heavily towards LLI, but they're starting to do more granular screenings. So we can get external support with the information, responding to the information is the thing that we'll need that's like what we're looking for right now in a human or training humans that we have. And then just making sure that we can do that when another person used to own that system and is no longer with us.
Makes sense.
But we have some of the tools, and we're enacting them.
So I think to go back to a point that Juliana raised a moment ago, I think a question that is worth perhaps posing is like, what could go wrong here if things were to come up short? Where might it happen? And I think for my view would be based on past experiences, what tends to be hardest. We've got ample assessments going on here, so we should have the data we need to then make good decisions. It's about responding directly and swiftly to the data that we have in hand immediately following each assessment. So that responsiveness is where I think if we are strong there, it will show in student growth academically. If we're not, we'll see some stagnance. And so I guess the ask here is proactively to inquire about kind of how things are going in that specific realm for us as a school, as we continue to meet on a monthly basis and look at results.
Well, I think one other thought there, a question that I feel like we have perennially is whether the data is actually properly predictive. There are definitely times where it looks like some percentage is trending toward proficient, and then there's a surprise when we receive the data at the end. And so there, your data is useful if it's actually what you need, I guess. And to your point, these kids are taking a lot of tests, a lot of assessments. So I think just keeping an eye on what's worthwhile and what's actually helpful and predictive is important too.
Right on. Adding to that point, Jeanette, Michelle is working on some updated correlations across these different results. We shared something out last September. Now that we have test data again for another year, we've got more data to compare and can be even more confident with what assessments seem to be most predictive and which ones perhaps are not worth continuing with if they're not offering that forecasting. So we'll report out that next month. So I guess with that, we move into the next deep dive, but I think just stamping where we are now, the general sense I'm kind of hearing from the board here is that you feel comfortable with these priority goals that are included here, and wouldn't make any amendments to what is here. Jim, you had inquired about another goal which was listed in green before, and not that I was hiding that, but there's some other goals that didn't make this top 10. That goal in green around 8th grade reading results is one of those sort of next tier important goals that we have. But again, we think if we hit these marks, we will be experiencing a successful year with regard to what students gain at our school. So that's where we are. Let's move into the next deep dive for today. And that's around some dashboard work. And this was motivated by our last meeting, in which I think the call was, hey, are there ways in which we can incorporate more academic updates for our general board dashboard? And then what might kind of such a dashboard look like for the SLC? And so this was also a deep dive with the SLC just over a week ago. And so some of that discussion informs what I'm presenting tonight. So I'm going to share with you what we've used before, what we're planning to use moving forward, some of the differences between what we've used before versus now, and then how that aligns and compares with a more specific and specialized SLC teaching and learning dashboard. So with that, and the question then in the end is, do these updates in our dashboards position board, the team here in these monthly calls, our school, well in making the decisions over the course of the year to drive academic success? So we'll circle back to that. You saw this last month. This is how we kind of closed out the year this past year. And you see on the left some of the tables within our general governance dashboard that we've used, along with targets and where things landed and some explanatory notes. So this is something you saw back in August, but We had 13 different kind of data points that we can look at different frequencies over the course of the year. And I think your step back recommendation was perhaps some additional kind of academic outcome information in this dashboard would be helpful. So I think with that, in bringing that recommendation to the SLC, there were 2 additional data points that SLC thought were worthy of bringing to the full board. And that was around student GPAs or pass rates and having some sense of that frequently over the course of the year. So how are students doing as reflected in their grades? And then the other was something more concrete and summary like with regard to interim assessments, where a moment ago you got to see that those interim assessments are heavy as indicators over the course of the year. And so having some way to look at those really cleanly and easily, visually within the dashboard was something that the SLC recommended made sense. And so I think with that, there are 2 additional sort of data points that we'll look at generally with the full board, in addition to what we look at over the course of the year that's been there in the past. Jeanette or Juliana, am I accurate? Kind of what I'm presenting at now, or would you add something?
That was right.
And so I guess Jim and Sal, again, we're looking at 2 additional data points where, like, over the course of the year, we might look at, it might be monthly, it might be every other month. It kind of depends on when new information comes forward, but you'll have more represented here with regard to how students are doing based on their grades and how students are doing based on interim results. We'll circle back to this. What I want to do now is also kind of bring the full board some of the elements of an SLC dashboard, which is now being created and will be presented during the October meeting. And so these are more heavily based on kind of academic growth, success, proficiency over the course of the year. There is some overlap with what is here data-wise and then what is included in the governance dashboard, but there are also elements here that are more specific. And so specifically, here are the 2 dashboards lined up next to each other. The governance dashboard with its 2 new data points around academics is on the left. And then on the right are the elements of an SLC dashboard moving forward. What I've highlighted in blue is where there's overlap. So both dashboards would include grades, interim assessments, attendance rates, and suspension rates. Elements of academic success, kind of a crude measure of climate, but something that's there. And then another arguably data point reflecting kind of climate, which is in attendance. Kids coming to school and being fired up each and every day. What is different across the 2 is that the SLC dashboard would have course pass rates. What percentage of kids are passing ELA at different points in the year in the 8th grade, or math in the 9th grade. And so that would be available in addition to the percentage of kids who are failing 2 or more classes as an indicator of just struggle, and the way in which we intervene or perhaps miss opportunities to intervene in supporting kids who are not demonstrating levels of proficiency. We've got a measure on climate score that goes back to the assessment I mentioned earlier that we'll be conducting in the coming week around, like, hey, to what extent are we doing and implementing the things that we want to implement school culture and climate-wise at the school? And that's wrapped up in a score. And then there's a measure around teacher skill and proficiency rates demonstrated over the course of the year, as well as staffing vacancies, and some sense of that in kind of concrete form over the course of each month. So these are the 2 dashboards meant to infuse more academic data into our conversations over the course of each meeting, as well as in committee meetings. Let me kind of stop there and see if, again, this meets the mark, or you have suggestions for making it sharper or better. Jim, is this kind
I
of what
think
you
it's fine.
the
I think it's fine.
last month? But we made cross wires. Jim, is this sort of meet the mark of what you
Yeah,
kind of
yeah. I
imagine
think we just go
going?
with it. But yeah, I think we go with it. This is, yeah. I mean, I look, fundamentally, the way I look at this stuff is we're in a deep hole here, and it's not, the COVID thing created a deep hole for a lot of people. So you gotta get out of that hole. And what specifically, attendance, obviously, there are a couple obvious things that you need to lean into to reverse the year that we lost. And what are those things? Would you measure? Is there anything else you would measure to show that you've gone on the offensive to get out of the hole that every school in the country is in right now, who's shut down, right?
Yeah. So I think with that, we'll begin implementing all of this into our meetings each month and into each committee meeting. And so I look forward to digging into some of this data with you next month. I think we can move on to the next agenda item for tonight, Jim, which relates to committee meetings
I'm looking for it.
and reports.
Okay, SLC, was this SLC or is there more to it?
Yeah, generally speaking. So I think, I'll just kind of I think the thing to do is just to sort of say, hey, here's what we talked about with the SLC. And we talked about some of the major headlines. We reviewed goals and targets and discussed the dashboard along with a couple of miscellaneous updates. And so I think with that, we brought forth what we thought was most important to the full board tonight. Jeanette, Juliana, would you add anything there in debriefing on the meeting, I guess, just under 2 weeks ago now?
I think we've hit the key items.
Yeah, I in addition to hitting the key items, you guys took so much of the feedback from our robust discussion. So I'm excited to see that and excited to just track this throughout the year.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for the feedback in that meeting. And so, yeah, definitely want to honor it and see it through. So that's SLC. I think the next kind of update comes from the AFC. And so I think with that, I can say a few quick headlines, and then there's something that we do want to show and tell today. And so updates include nothing to bring to the full board that I think requires a full-on discussion, just some general FYIs and updates. So with regard to closing out year-end results, we're in a good place. I think Marion offered an update last month and kind of where things stand. And so I'm going to have Kristen in a moment kind of share out a few metrics of meaning from the closeout of the 23 fiscal year. Before doing that, though, I'll just provide the other headlines. And so in terms of current financials, as of August, it's early in the year, so there isn't a whole lot to report out of interest. Just know that there have been some meaningful updates that Kristen has put forth in making, I think, some of the information given to the AFC each month more powerful, more important, more meaningful. And so I just want to kind of quickly shout her out without going into too much detail. We had talked about amending the 23-24 budget in October once we have a sense of enrollment, which I reported out on earlier tonight, as well as a few other kind of pieces in play. And so that's still on target. And so we will report out or provide an amended budget after meeting with the AFC in just a couple of weeks now. And so there's been some decent progress there already. So look forward to sharing that out. and then a few other kind of nuances with insurance and some questions there coming from Arione, as well as some discussion around bus contracts. And so that was, I think, a summary of the meeting. Kristen or Jeanette, would you add anything there before showing off some of the updated reports that we're using?
No, I think that was good.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Kristen's reports are great, so I'm excited for everyone to see those.
In fact, let's do it. Quick, Chris, I think you got to do the whole co-host thing. For some reason, I don't have access here.
Yep, got it.
Thanks.
Should be set.
Okay. All right, you can see it now. Okay, so yep, we're trying to update our metrics a little bit and the visual that go along with the financial metrics. Reporting has been updated for a one-page kind of lookout of, are we meeting our metrics when it comes to the state education department, and then are we also meeting our metrics with the bond covenants? I do have up June's, so we're not going to get into the bond covenant part of it today, but that will be part of every report out going forward, just to make sure we're compliant. But for now, we're going to just focus on the state education department metrics. So for the end of the year, we are looking at a bunch of green, and the state metrics are in this light gray area. And we are looking for green cells in each of these boxes. So you can see we met 4 of the metrics. We were short on the 5th, which is days of cash on hand. And this metric looks at just Unity. It does not look at FOMB's cash. It's just Unity's cash, which is what we are graded on as part of the financial evaluation for the renewals.
Is this after sending over the cash that we sent over the other day?
Well, we can't go backwards because it's the cash as of June 30th. So that cash was not in for this calculation. It will be in.
So didn't we do that to satisfy the auditors, and show the auditors that there was a profit?
So yeah, the profit versus the cash is measured differently.
Oh,
Correct.
Profit, by moving the cash after year end, you get the receivable, right, Kristen? Whereas this looks at what's actually in the bank account. So we did talk
makes sense.
about how for next year, we're going to have a discussion item a few months before year end to look at this issue and move the cash earlier if needed. Hopefully not needed.
Yep,
Makes sense.
exactly. Thank you, Jeanette. We're gonna take that April, we're gonna talk about it. May, we're gonna make a decision and move in June what needs to be moved. So that way we can make sure that metric is meeting what it needs to meet from just the Unity perspective. Obviously, the bond covenant looks at both entities together, which if Unity is making it, then the 2 of them are making it automatically because it's both 60 days cash on hand. So just wanted it to be visually easy so that you can see pretty quickly, green's good, red's bad, where are we falling short. So for year end, we met our margin ratio, the debt to asset ratio, and our working capital ratio. And then if we're meeting our margin, we're also meeting the variance between revenue and expenditures on a per pupil as well. So this is just kind of the new snapshot. There's some more reporting behind that. And I think Josh will really kind of show that, I think, next month with our September reporting.
Mm-hmm.
So are there any questions on that? Okay.
Thanks, Kristen.
Yep.
Well, can you do the bottom part, the bond covenant part?
I can. It's not complete. I just want to kind of warn
I
that.
just want to see what we're going to be looking at.
Yep.
Okay, so the SCR cash. What are the covenants?
So we've got our days of cash on hand, which is also 60 days, same as the New York State. And then we have our debt service coverage ratio. So we need to be at or greater than 1.1. So we couldn't calculate it yet. Yep, we couldn't calculate it for this year, obviously, because we don't have debt to service to kind of compare it against. But that's what it'll look like. Yep. And it also, just for, informational purposes, cash on hand, we aren't actually held to the covenant, to that particular benchmark, until the 24-25 school year. And then for the debt service ratio, we don't hit that one until 25-26 school year. We're going to track it because we want to make sure we're being compliant from the get-go and correcting if we're not for some reason. But we want to start tracking that now.
The only thing I'd say is these are backward looking. So it will be helpful. We had a little challenge this year, using backward looking numbers to make a forward looking decision on hiring people and whatnot. So if you could maybe have, actual and then two columns with numbers, actual and pro forma.
So
Sure.
that's kind of where we're gonna, I think, try to do this top one and then the bottom one, Jim. Try to have like where are we at in that moment, and then where are we projecting to be at the end of the year? Is that what you were looking for? I mean, don't look at the numbers on this, but that's the intention. Is this top box will be where are we at the date we're reporting, and then where are we?
Oh yeah,
projecting to the year end?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Anything else? All right.
Thanks, Chris. So next committee report out is the Development and Facilities Committee. Jim and Sally can kind of name the gist of the meeting, and feel free to add any details you think that are helpful to the full board. I provided some ideas in initial form, fundraising wise, to Jim and to Sal. Those revolved around some naming rights ideas, some nameplates ideas, the idea of bringing forth an advisory council and having kind of dues incorporated within that, as well as some small program specific campaigns that are going on right now. We have a kind of a very specific campaign around our debate program, and so that would be one example of things that we're raising money for. And then we are renting out our gym and other aspects of the facility when we're not using it. And so these are some ways in which we hope to enrich school programming in the coming year beyond what we're able to provide now. So those are a few ideas. Next month, I'm going to come forward with something more concrete that will offer more details into each of these. But our first meeting of this year was mainly a brainstorm around some of these ideas. I mentioned the grant already, so I'll move on from that. Beyond development, regarding facilities, I did meet with the developers of the renovated space that we now exist in at the high school, and the prior owners about perhaps the possibility of expanding the high school building, just to get some general ideas. So very early meeting there, but it was helpful to hear some of what they had to say with regard to how we might do this if we're able to. So nothing more to report there other than there's been some exploring here. And beyond that, I think that was it. There's an interest on my end in expanding our FOMB board recruitment. We didn't talk about that during the meeting, but obviously if people on this call know of folks who might be interested and a good fit for that board, I'm all ears. And so I've got a few ideas, but I'm certainly looking to find really good people who are committed to the mission of FOMB and supporting schools such as Unity. Sal, Jim, would you add anything?
I can't remember. Where do we leave it off with? Is Dweck going back and putting together a budget, or what's he doing?
A proposal for a meeting, and we're still waiting to hear for that. So I may reach out to him later this week if I don't hear from him. So the next step is just a sit down and some trading of ideas.
Okay, and then we have that whole list from CBRE, and then we've got going vertical, which is more Dweck, but he could also be a part of both. We need to decide on whether we hire Loci as the owner's rep to project manage it, which I think is a good idea. Get that fee sorted out, and then. But I think right now we're in a holding pattern for David to get back to us on the cost of this whole thing, but we do need to spend that money. It's sitting in escrow. Did that get finalized? The escrow? the investment in,
Yeah, where are we there? I believe so. I have actually, I have something to sign that hit my inbox today. So
Okay.
progress will be there. Thank you for your feedback there.
okay, so we've got that.
Mm.
But we're not on a terribly short fuse, but it's short enough that we got to get going on making these renovations that we borrowed the money for. So, well, why don't you ping David and see where he is on thinking about a budget.
Mhm.
And then, once he gets us a number, we can decide, what our total funding looks like today.
Mhm.
Obviously, we're going to raise more around this and then figure out timing to go on vertical. But, okay, good.
Cool. All right, before moving on to the last committee update, there's a sneak peek of our building in its best light and what it might become rather soon. And with ECPC, a couple of updates here. First, I want to just thank Trudy Sandy, who came in and spoke to our staff during our first day of orientation. And so I shared this out with her and with Sal during the ECPC meeting, but she had a whole lot of shine in the feedback survey that was completed after that first day. I want to say, maybe 20 staff members highlighted her as having an impression on them and informing some of their thinking moving into the year. And so I've offered that in blue on this slide. The question I posed out to team in collecting just some general information on the day was, as a community of learners, which is one of our core values as a staff, what's one thing that you learned from a colleague or presenter this morning that will prove valuable in your success this year? And this person had nothing but really great things to say about, I think, what Trudy shared with the team and her experiences at Unity, her experiences with her son, who's now in his third year of college. And so I want to thank her just for committing to our school and coming in and doing that in a busy day for her.
Yeah, the blue, it says kind of the second to last line, need to up the academic rigor. That's something we talk about a lot.
Yeah.
Do you think that with the new curriculum, that you're putting in place, et cetera, that it's adequately upped, that you're challenging kids enough? We talk about, are these kids being challenged enough? Because kids do tend to rise to the occasion. Some don't, but most do. Mm-hmm. What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, no, good question. I'll let Melissa kind of field this, but I think the curriculum is one important factor to kids experiencing a rigorous education that is motivating and inspiring to them too. Melissa, what would you add?
I'm more confident than ever in what we're asking of kids, that especially at the middle level, the tasks that students are answering and engaging in, the texts, the number of texts that students are engaging in ELA. Our 8th graders are reading Shakespeare. They're doing Socratic seminars on Shakespeare. They're doing short quizzes that prepare them for state tests on a similar rigor level of work and writing about it. This is the right cycle. This will also rest on being able to unpack our curriculum in a way that's really meaningful. We're a small school and we're doing a lot new because it's time. We have a lot of information that says we must. So some of the what we're doing is stronger, and we also need to focus on the how we're doing it.
Okay.
So just a few updates coming out of that meeting. Trudy and myself and Sal discussed just some goals for the committee this year. So I want to share those goals with this group and then field any ideas or questions folks have. But essentially, we have 4 goals within the committee work on kind of family engagement and community engagement at the school this coming year. One of these is just around having you all kind of engage in fun ways with our kids that allow for both you to know school and for school to know you over the course of the year. I'll say a bit more there in a moment. We also talked about this idea of an advisory council, which was discussed as a development tool also with the DFC. But the idea there is we're trying to build more connections with community And an advisory council would be in a way in which we do that, in which there are young professionals who are committing to school more informally than being a full-on board member, but committed to the cause and there to support in ways that make sense. So I'll say more about that next month, but that came up during our conversation too. In terms of motivation and support, mentoring is something that we see as a need. We've done some of that in-house in small form, but expanding that out would, I think, be a very impactful way of getting kids excited and engaged in school. And so as a part of the grant that we applied for, there is a mentoring component there. And there's been some outreach with at least one other organization outside of our school that may be able to provide some resources, but that's something else we discussed. And then finally, we opened with internship opportunities and highlighted 2 students during tonight's meeting. And so we'd like to bring that back. As I said, COVID really hindered opportunities for kids to gain those exposures just because of restrictions. And so we're back on. And so wanting to kind of bring that back to our school like it was in 2018-19 and then expand it out, I think is also really engaging for kids. So I think with that, those are some of the things that we talked about, which would make for a really terrific year from a community engagement standpoint. And so more to say there. The one thing that we did discuss is, hey, let's get some events out there to our board so that they're able to kind of plan forward with their busy lives and say, yeah, I can commit to this event this year. Count me in. I'm giving you a sneak peek now. We'll circle back in October and I'll have even more specific dates for you. But essentially what we'd like is to have a representative of our board present at some of these bigger events over the course of the year. It's important and really meaningful. People take notice. And so some of those events include, we've got 2 dance recitals that happen, one in the winter and one in the spring. They're really, really great and pack the house. And so that would be one event which I could see people having fun at and also just kind of giving you a sense of school vibes. We'll do a career day. We did it 2 occasions last year. And so that's something else which is really aligned to the way in which board members could engage kids at our school. We do an art exhibit twice a year. We did it once last year, so maybe in the spring. I've got to confirm that, but that's a great event that happens outside the building at a real art exhibition space. And so that's something that would be a lot of fun to schmooze with families and kids and enjoy and take in some of the art they create. College signing day, big event for us at the high school. That's another. Roundtable presentations, big event for us at the middle school that's happening in June. Obviously, our graduation ceremonies that take place in Bed-Stuy and very likely in downtown Manhattan again this year at our high school. And then beyond that, if you're into sports, we've got award ceremonies happening. They're a lot of fun too, to see some of our student athletes get recognized for their accomplishments, both on the field and in school. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be taking part in some of these sort of climate-esque walkthroughs to get a sense of how things are going with our PBIS systems at the school and their implementation. As we roll those out, would love to invite members of the board to come in and take part in those. And so again, 9 events here where you get to choose one that seems to excite you most. Sal said to me during the ECPC call, he said, put all the pressure you can on these folks so they can.
Josh, you're being so nice.
So I'm just doing my job here, Sal.
You're too kind, Josh. But I mean, look, I don't know how many of us there are, but I think we need to, just as accountability, we each put our name next to one of them, at least by next meeting. Multiple of us can go to any one event, obviously, but put your name next to one of them and sort of just plan ahead. So we got to stay connected. I will go to one of the 2 art exhibits as well as the middle school graduation, if
Awesome.
not others as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Sal.
So you guys can keep me accountable.
Sneak peek here. We'll do signups next month. Thanks, Sal. Thanks, team.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're I'm
No, we have something
slide,
to-
Jim. Thank you very much. Yeah, I am short one
Yeah.
slide. Let's go to that. And so there's one approval item tonight, Jim.
Okay, so the The approval item is the minutes from the last meeting. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Okay, all in favor of approving those minutes, show your hands, please. Thank you. Okay. Minutes are approved. Let's move on to public comments. Any members from the public on the call? No. Okay, preview next meeting, Josh.
Sure thing. So next meeting is October 17th. That's going to feel short in terms of duration because we're now into late September. So we'll see you again quite soon, which is great. Even better, this was a meeting that in the spring we said, let's do this in person. And so this will be at 584 Driggs. It's a 7 p.m. meeting. If there's an interest among board members who tend to go to bed a bit earlier, we can shift this up to 6 if you like. Typically, there's been differing opinions with regard to start time, so I'll let you all make the decision, but we could do that. We can host that. I think the move here would be probably to have an hour-long meeting and then move into getting some food afterward, and perhaps continuing a conversation about business or about anything else. But that would be the October meeting on the 17th.
And I'm fine moving to 6 if people want to do that.
Same.
Yeah. Janet, what's your preference?
I will try to make it work either way, so whatever is best for others.
Sal, how about you? I know that you got a little commute here, so you can kind of plan ahead. So you might not know.
No, I'll be in Brooklyn by then, I think. But earlier start is better.
Okay. All right. Let me check with.
But yeah, I'm
Earl,
open either way. I'm flexible.
And Lenny about 6 or 7, but I'm hearing a slight perhaps preference to 6 if you was, if we can swing it. Cool. Beyond an in-person meeting, I imagine we will be reporting out on STAR reading and math baseline results. We may be reporting out more in middle school state exam results if we get comparative data at the state level and city level and community level. As I mentioned, we will bring forward an amended budget for the board to weigh in on and perhaps approve for 23-24 that reflects kind of like where we are now, given some of the big moves that we made over the course of the summer. And then I will bring forth after kind of convening with the DFC a kind of proposed development action plan, fundraising plan for the year. I think that's it.
I think you might want to expand that meeting to include anybody who wants to join it. This is the the fundraising around the building and all that. Is that it? I don't know if everybody's on that invite for that call, but
happy to do so. One thought I had is maybe that depending on timing on the 17th, that could be something which could be worthy of like just some big kind of thoughts as we get some food too, if we want to talk about business. That would be the item I think that would perhaps align most with breaking bread.
Yeah.
But
okay.
I can invite folks to the committee call too.
Yeah. Okay, should we move to executive session?
Sure. Yeah.